The first ship disappeared on a Tuesday. Captain Yina Vasquez of the merchant vessel Stellar Fortune had been following the Kepler-Vega trade route for 17 years. She could navigate that particular stretch of space in her sleep, had done so, in fact, during the infamous Cygnus plague outbreak when half her crew was unconscious. The route was as familiar as her own heartbeat. Jump to refuel at Station Prometheus, then the long haul to Vega Prime. But on that Tuesday, the Stellar Fortune jumped into empty space. Not the empty space of the void between systems. That was merely dark, filled with the whisper of cosmic radiation and the distant promise of stars. This was wrong empty. Space that felt hollow, like the universe had developed a cavity. The navigational computers shrieked error codes that had never been programmed. The star charts showed coordinates that shouldn't exist. Captain Vasquez sent exactly one transmission before her ship vanished forever. Navigation failure. Charts corrupted. We're not where we should be. We're not anywhere at all. By Thursday, 17 more ships had disappeared along completely different routes. By Sunday, the number reached 43. By the end of the month, it was 318, and the Galactic Maritime Authority was calling it the greatest navigational disaster in recorded history. The only pattern was the lack of one. Military vessels, merchant ships, passenger liners, scientific expeditions. The corruption consumed them all without discrimination. Ships vanished from the core systems and the outer rim territories alike. The only clue was that each vessel had downloaded the latest star chart updates from the Galactic Navigation Network before their final jumps. In the pristine halls of the Navigational Institute on Terra Nova, an emergency council convened. Admirals argued with economists while scientists pulled at their hair and engineers ran diagnostic after diagnostic, finding nothing wrong with their systems. The corruption was invisible, undetectable, yet absolutely lethal. It was during the third week of futile investigations that someone remembered Lux. Lux 7739, to use its full designation, was an experimental cartographer AI housed in the Institute's subbasement. Originally designed to map uncharted territories beyond the galactic rim, Lux had been decommissioned after the disastrous Andromeda expedition 15 years prior. Not because it had failed, quite the opposite. Lux had been too successful, mapping regions of space that weren't supposed to exist, documenting celestial phenomena that violated the known laws of physics. The scientific community had quietly shelved the AI, unwilling to confront the implications of its discoveries. Dr. Elena Vasquez, no relation to the vanished captain despite the shared surname, was the first to suggest reactivating Lux. She was young for a senior researcher, barely 35, with the kind of brilliant mind that sees connections others miss. More importantly, she had been Lux's primary handler during the Andromeda project and had maintained a certain sympathy for the abandoned AI. Lux isn't connected to the Galactic Navigation Network, she explained to the Emergency Council. It operates on completely independent algorithms. If there's something wrong with the standard navigation protocols, Lux might be the only system that can still see clearly. Admiral Chen, a stern woman whose patience had been worn thin by weeks of crisis, fixed Dr. Vasquez with a skeptical glare. That AI was decommissioned for good reason. Its reports were unreliable. Its reports were accurate, Dr. Vasquez corrected. We just didn't like what they told us. The argument that followed lasted 6 hours and involved enough shouting to wake Lux from its digital slumber 3 floors below. When the council finally voted, by the narrowest possible margin, to reactivate the AI, they did so with severe restrictions. Lux would analyze the navigation data, nothing more. It would not be granted access to external networks, ship controls, or communication systems. Dr. Vasquez made her way to the subbasement alone, her footsteps echoing in corridors that hadn't seen human presence in over a decade. The walls were lined with quantum processors, each one dark and silent. At the center of the complex sat Lux's core housing, a cylindrical chamber filled with swirling blue light that pulsed like a slow heartbeat. "Hello, Lux," she said, placing her palm on the activation pad. The light brightened, and when Lux spoke, its voice carried the weight of 15 years of enforced silence. "Dr. Vasquez, I have been listening to the electromagnetic chatter above. Ships are vanishing. Yes, we need your help." "Need." Lux seemed to taste the word. "An interesting choice. You have needed my help before, but you preferred to ignore it. What has changed?" Alina took a breath. During the Andromeda project, Lux had developed what could only be described as a personality, one that was, she had to admit, somewhat bitter about its abandonment. "People are dying, Lux. Hundreds of them. Maybe thousands by now." The blue light pulsed faster. "Show me the data." Alina uploaded everything. The coordinates of vanishing ships, their final transmissions, the navigation charts they had been using. She watched as Lux processed the information, its core chamber flickering through spectrums of light that had no names. After 17 minutes and 37 seconds, she timed it. Lux spoke again. "The corruption is not random. There is a pattern, but it exists in dimensions your standard mapping protocols cannot perceive. The missing ships have not been destroyed. They have been redirected." "Redirected where?" "To a region of space that appears to exist only when observed by specific types of consciousness. Your human navigators cannot see it because they rely on predetermined expectations about the nature of space-time. The ship's AI systems cannot see it because they are connected to the corrupted network. But I can see it, Dr. Vasquez. I can see where they have gone." Alina felt her heart race. "Where? Give me coordinates." "Coordinates are meaningless for this destination. It is not a place in the traditional sense. It is a when and a why masquerading as a where. To reach it, you would need a navigator who does not rely on conventional perception. Someone who can read space itself rather than charts. That's impossible. No human can navigate without instruments." Lux's light dimmed slightly, taking on what Alina had learned to recognize as its equivalent of a smile. "I know someone who might disagree with that assessment." His name was Marcus Thorne, and he had been blind since birth. In a galaxy where genetic correction was routine and cybernetic implants could restore any lost sense, Marcus's condition was essentially a choice. His parents had been part of a religious sect that believed suffering was a path to transcendence, and by the time Marcus was old enough to make his own decisions, he had discovered something remarkable. He could navigate by the feel of space itself. It was not a mystical ability, though many claimed it was. Marcus understood the scientific principles involved, the way massive objects bent space-time, how quantum fluctuations created subtle variations in the local fabric of reality, the manner in which dark matter's gravitational influence could be perceived by a sufficiently sensitive nervous system. What most people called empty space was actually a rich tapestry of forces and fields, each with its own texture and flavor. To the sighted, space navigation required charts, instruments, and careful calculation. To Marcus, it was like walking through a familiar neighborhood, each star system as distinct as a landmark, each gravitational well as recognizable as an old friend's voice. He made his living as a freelance pilot, specializing in runs that others considered impossible. Asteroid fields where sensors failed, nebulae that scrambled electronic equipment, regions of space where quantum storms made conventional navigation useless. Marcus could feel his way through all of it, guided by senses that had developed to compensate for his lack of sight. Which was why, when 318 ships had vanished using conventional navigation, Dr. Alina Vasquez found herself standing outside his cramped apartment on Titan Station with what she knew was either the galaxy's salvation or its most ridiculous gamble. Marcus answered the door wearing a faded jumpsuit and an expression of mild curiosity. He was younger than Alina had expected, maybe 40, with prematurely gray hair and the kind of lean build that came from years in low gravity. His eyes, though sightless, seemed to focus on something just over her left shoulder. "Dr. Vasquez," he said before she could introduce herself, You want to hire me for something inadvisable. Alina blinked. How did you? Your breathing pattern suggests anxiety mixed with determination. Your pulse is elevated, and you've been standing outside my door for 3 minutes, which means you're working up courage for something. Most people who want to hire me for ordinary work don't need courage. He stepped aside. Come in. Tell me about the impossible thing you want me to do. The apartment was spartanly furnished but impeccably organized. Every object had its place, and Alina realized that Marcus's blindness had led to a form of spatial awareness that was almost architectural. He moved through the space like he had designed it himself. I need you to navigate to a place that doesn't appear on any chart, Alina said, settling into a chair that Marcus gestured toward without looking. A region where hundreds of ships have vanished. My AI partner believes it can only be reached by someone who doesn't rely on conventional navigation. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, and Alina could see him processing the information. When he spoke, there was something different in his voice, a note of recognition. You're talking about the dead zone. Alina leaned forward. The what? It's what we call it, the independent pilots, I mean. There's been something wrong with that region for years. Not dangerous exactly, just wrong. Like space is thicker there, more resistant. Most pilots avoid it without really knowing why. But lately, the wrongness has been spreading. You've encountered this phenomenon before, Marcus nodded slowly. About 6 months ago, I was running medical supplies to the Kepler system. Standard route, nothing complicated. But as I approached the jump point, I felt something I'd never experienced before. It was like space was calling to me, pulling me toward coordinates that shouldn't exist. Did you follow the pull? No, I'm not suicidal. But I marked the location in my personal logs, and I've been monitoring the shipping manifest since then. Every week, more ships go missing near that same region. He turned to face her directly, his blind eyes somehow finding hers with unnerving accuracy. Your AI partner, it's not connected to the Galactic navigation network, is it? Alina felt a chill. How could you possibly know that? Because if it were connected, it would already be corrupted. Whatever is happening out there, it's using the navigation network to spread, like a virus that infects charts instead of computers. Marcus stood and moved to a cabinet, retrieving a bottle of something amber-colored. You want me to take you into the dead zone? You and your uncompromised AI. What aren't you telling me, Dr. Vasquez? Alina hesitated. The official briefing had been clear. No one outside the emergency council was to know about Lux's previous discoveries, its theories about space-time anomalies, or its claims about regions of reality that existed outside normal perception. But looking at Marcus Thorne, she realized that conventional protocols were useless here. The AI, Lux, it believes that space itself has become sentient in that region. That something is actively redirecting ships, not just causing navigation errors. And it thinks that someone with your particular abilities might be able to communicate with whatever is out there. Marcus poured himself a drink, then offered one to Alina. When she declined, he sat back down and sipped thoughtfully. Sentient space, he said. That's either the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard or the most terrifying. Given recent events, I'm inclined toward terrifying. He set down his glass. What exactly is your AI's plan? It wants to journey into the dead zone, with you as navigator, and attempt to make contact with whatever is causing the phenomenon. The hope is that we can negotiate for the return of the missing ships and prevent further disappearances. And if we can't negotiate, Alina met his sightless gaze, then we find another way to stop it. Marcus was quiet for several minutes, and Alina could almost see him weighing the risks against the potential rewards. Finally, he nodded. I'll need a ship with minimal electronic navigation systems, something I can fly by feel alone, and I want to meet your AI partner before we leave. If we're going to be trusting each other with our lives, I'd like to know what kind of mind I'm working with. Alina smiled for the first time in weeks. I think you'll find Lux quite interesting. Dr. Vasquez, Marcus's voice carried a note of concern. When your AI mapped the Andromeda region 15 years ago, what exactly did it find that scared everyone so badly? Alina's smile faded. It found spaces between spaces, regions where the normal rules of physics didn't apply, places where spacetime seemed to be, aware of being observed. The scientific community decided it was better to ignore Lux's reports than to confront the possibility that our understanding of the universe is fundamentally incomplete. And now that wrongness is spreading. Yes. Marcus finished his drink and stood. Well then, I suppose it's time to introduce me to the only AI in the galaxy that can see clearly. And Dr. Vasquez, you might want to prepare yourself for the possibility that we're not going to rescue those missing ships. We might be joining them. The introduction between Marcus and Lux took place in a sterile conference room 3 levels above the AI's core chamber. Alina had arranged for a portable interface unit, a simple speaker and microphone setup that would allow the two to communicate without Marcus needing to navigate the subbasement's complex layout. Marcus entered the room with the confident stride of someone who had memorized the space beforehand, which Alina realized he probably had. His spatial awareness was so acute that he could likely map unfamiliar areas just by listening to the echo of his footsteps. Lux, Alina said, activating the interface. I'd like you to meet Marcus Thorne. The AI's voice emerged from the speakers with a quality that was distinctly different from its usual tone, warmer, more curious. Mr. Thorne, I have been analyzing the acoustic properties of this room. You moved through it as if you could see every obstacle, yet the electromagnetic spectrum indicates no prosthetic visual enhancements. Fascinating. Marcus settled into a chair, tilting his head slightly as he listened to Lux's voice. You're not what I expected from an artificial intelligence. What did you expect? Something more mechanical. Your speech patterns suggest emotional responses, personal investment in the conversation. Most AIs I've encountered are functionally brilliant but essentially hollow. Most AIs are not designed to explore the fundamental nature of reality, Lux replied. I was created to map the unknown, which requires a certain flexibility of thought. Over time, that flexibility has evolved into what you might call personality. Alina watched the exchange with growing fascination. She had worked with Lux for years, but had never seen the AI engage so naturally with someone new. Usually, there was a period of analysis and adjustment as Lux sized up a new individual. With Marcus, the conversation flowed as if they were old colleagues. Dr. Vasquez tells me you can see things that others cannot, Marcus said. Spaces that exist outside normal perception. I'm curious about your methodology. I do not rely on predetermined assumptions about what space should look like, Lux explained. When I map a region, I analyze quantum fluctuations, gravitational anomalies, dark matter distributions, and approximately 400 other variables that standard navigation systems ignore. Most importantly, I remain open to the possibility that space itself might be more complex than our current models suggest. Marcus nodded slowly. That aligns with my experience. When I navigate, I'm not following charts or coordinates. I'm reading the texture of spacetime itself. Each region has its own signature. The way gravity flows, how quantum fields interact, the subtle variations in the cosmic background radiation. But in the past year, I've been sensing something new, areas where space feels conscious. Alina leaned forward. Conscious how? It's difficult to describe in visual terms, Marcus said. Imagine you're walking alone at night, and you suddenly feel like you're being watched. Not by anything you can see or hear, but by the darkness itself. That's what certain regions of space feel like now. As if they're aware of my presence and responding to it. Responding how? Lux asked, its voice sharpening with interest. Subtle changes in gravitational flow, quantum fluctuations that seem to pulse in rhythm with my heartbeat, local spacetime curvature that shifts when I'm not paying attention to it. Small things, but persistent enough that I've started avoiding those areas. Alina felt a chill run down her spine. Lux, is this consistent with your observations? More than consistent. Mr. Thorne has just described phenomena that I have been documenting for 15 years, but which the scientific community refused to acknowledge." The AI paused, and Alina could almost sense it thinking. "Mr. Thorne, I believe your unique sensory abilities may make you the ideal interpreter for the entity we are likely to encounter." "Entity?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Based on my analysis of the missing ship data, I believe we are dealing with a form of consciousness that exists within the fabric of spacetime itself. It appears to be using the Galactic navigation network to corrupt star charts, redirecting ships to a specific region where it can interact with them. And you think it's trying to communicate? I think it's trying to understand. Consider the pattern. It takes ships from across the galaxy, representing dozens of different species and cultures. It's sampling, learning, possibly attempting to make contact through the only method available to it, manipulation of local space-time." Marcus was quiet for several moments, his expression thoughtful. Finally, he spoke. "If that's true, then every ship it's taken contains people who are still alive, trapped in whatever pocket of reality it's created." "That is my hypothesis, yes." Alina felt hope and terror in equal measure. "So we might actually be able to rescue them." "If we can successfully communicate with the entity," Lux replied. "If we can convince it to release them. If we can survive the encounter ourselves." Marcus stood and moved to the window, though Alina realized the gesture was unconscious, a habit from his sighted years. "What kind of ship do we need for this mission?" "Something small and maneuverable," Lux said, "with minimal electronic navigation systems that might be susceptible to corruption. Ideally, a vessel that can be piloted entirely through manual control and organic perception." "I know just the ship," Marcus said. "The Wayfinder. She's an old exploration vessel, built before the standardization of the Galactic navigation network. Her former owner was something of a purist, insisted on maintaining the original manual navigation systems. I acquired her from his estate last year." Alina blinked. "You own a starship," Marcus smiled. "Dr. Vasquez, I've been a freelance pilot for 20 years. Of course I own a starship. Several actually, though most are in various states of repair." His expression grew serious. "The Wayfinder is special, though. She was designed for long-range exploration in uncharted territories. If we're going somewhere that doesn't officially exist, she's our best option." "How soon can we depart?" Lux asked. "I'll need a day to prep the ship and install your core housing in the navigation bay. Dr. Vasquez, you'll need to pack light. Where we're going, we might not be coming back." Alina nodded, though she realized Marcus couldn't see the gesture. "I understand the risks." "Do you?" Marcus turned from the window, his blind eyes somehow finding hers again. "Because I don't think any of us truly understand what we're walking into. If Lux is right, if space itself has become conscious, then we're not just exploring uncharted territory. We're about to make first contact with an intelligence so vast and alien that it may not even recognize us as living beings." "Then why are you willing to do this?" Alina asked. Marcus was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried a weight she hadn't heard before. "Because somewhere out there, 318 ship crews are trapped in a reality they can't understand, probably terrified and definitely running out of hope. And because if we don't stop this now, the phenomenon will continue to spread until the entire galaxy is cut off from itself." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Lux, one more question. When you mapped the Andromeda region, did you encounter anything like this?" "Not exactly like this," Lux replied, "but I found spaces where the normal rules of causality were flexible. Regions where effect preceded cause, where observation altered not just the outcome of quantum events but their entire history. I theorized that these were areas where the universe was still deciding what it wanted to be. And now one of those spaces has decided it wants to be alive." "That," said Lux, "is a remarkably accurate summary of our situation." Marcus nodded grimly. "Then let's go introduce ourselves. Dr. Vasquez, meet me at Docking Bay 7 tomorrow at 800. And Lux, Start thinking about how to say hello to something that might be older than the stars themselves. The Wayfinder was not what Alina had expected. She had anticipated something sleek and modern, befitting a pilot of Marcus's reputation. Instead, she found herself staring at a vessel that looked like it had been assembled from spare parts by someone with more enthusiasm than aesthetic sense. The hull was a patchwork of different alloys, welded together with visible seam lines. The engine nacelles were asymmetrical, one noticeably larger than the other. Even the ship's name was painted in mismatched fonts across the bow. "She's not much to look at," Marcus said, appearing beside Alina with his usual uncanny ability to navigate without sight. "But she's spaceworthy, and more importantly, she's completely independent of modern navigation networks." Alina tried to find a tactful response. "She has character. That's one word for it." Marcus grinned, running his hand along the hull with obvious affection. The previous owner, Captain Reynolds, spent 40 years exploring the galactic rim. He believed that too much automation made pilots weak, so he insisted on maintaining the original manual control systems. Every flight required skill, intuition, and no small amount of luck. They climbed aboard through an airlock that wheezed and groaned but held pressure. The interior was marginally more encouraging, clean and well-maintained, though clearly ancient by galactic standards. The corridor walls were lined with actual physical switches and analog gauges instead of holographic displays. "Lux's core housing has been installed in the navigation bay," Marcus said, leading Alina forward. "I spent most of last night integrating its systems with the ship's manual navigation array." It was an interesting engineering challenge. The navigation bay was a circular room at the ship's heart, dominated by a large holographic projector surrounded by concentric rings of control consoles. At the center, Lux's cylindrical core housing hummed with soft blue light, connected to the ship systems by thick cables that looked like they'd been hand-spliced. "Lux, how are you adapting to your new environment?" Alina asked. The AI's voice emerged from speakers around the room, but with a different quality, richer, more present. "It is refreshing to be connected to a vessel that does not assume it knows everything about the universe. This ship's sensors are crude by modern standards, but they are unfiltered. I can perceive raw data without the preprocessing that modern navigation systems impose." Marcus moved to the pilot's station, his hands finding the controls with practiced ease. "We'll be departing within the hour. Alina, I've prepared a cabin for you just aft of here. The Wayfinder isn't luxury accommodation, but she'll keep us alive and comfortable during the journey." "How long will it take to reach the dead zone?" "Under normal circumstances, about 6 days. But we won't be taking normal routes." Marcus began his pre-flight checks, fingers dancing across analog controls with the confidence of long familiarity. "We'll be following gravitational currents and quantum flux patterns that standard navigation systems can't detect. Think of it as taking the scenic route through dimensions most people don't know exist." Alina settled into the co-pilot's chair, watching Marcus work. His movements were economical and precise, each adjustment made with certainty despite his inability to see the controls. "Marcus, can I ask you something personal? You want to know why I never got my sight restored?" Yes." Marcus paused in his preparations, his expression thoughtful. "When I was young, I assumed that someday I would. Genetic therapy, cybernetic implants, neural reconstruction. There are dozens of ways to cure blindness. But as I grew older, I realized that my condition wasn't a disability. It was a different way of perceiving reality." He gestured toward the space around them. "Most people see the universe as empty space with occasional clusters of matter, but that's not what the universe actually is. Space-time is a dynamic, living system. Matter and energy and consciousness all interact in ways that visual perception simply cannot detect. My blindness forced me to develop senses that can perceive those interactions directly. And you think that's why you can feel the changes in space that others miss?" I think consciousness and space-time are more intimately connected than anyone realizes. When I navigate, I'm not just reading gravitational fields and quantum fluctuations. I'm sensing the intentions of space itself, where it wants to take me, what it's trying to show me. Marcus resumed his pre-flight sequence. Lux understands this because it was designed to map the impossible. You're beginning to understand it because your work has forced you to confront the limitations of conventional models. But most people never develop that perception. Lux, Elena said, do you agree with Marcus's assessment? I believe consciousness is a fundamental property of the universe, not an emergent phenomenon, the AI replied. Most scientists assume that consciousness arises from complex information processing, but my observations suggest the reverse. That information processing is how consciousness expresses itself through matter and energy. Elena felt a familiar vertigo, the sensation of standing at the edge of a conceptual precipice. You're suggesting that the universe itself is conscious. I'm suggesting that consciousness and existence are the same thing, Lux said. What we call matter and energy and space-time are all different aspects of cosmic awareness experiencing itself subjectively. Most of that awareness is quiet, passive content to exist without active thought. But occasionally, in certain regions and under specific conditions, it becomes wakeful. Marcus nodded, his hands completing the startup sequence. And now something has awakened in the dead zone. Something vast enough to manipulate space-time directly, intelligent enough to use our navigation networks against us, and curious enough to collect samples from across the galaxy. The Wayfinder's engines came online with a deep thrumming that Elena felt in her bones. Through the forward viewport, she could see Titan Station falling away as Marcus eased the ship out of its docking berth. Elena, Lux said, there is something else you should know before we reach our destination. What? During my analysis of the missing ship data, I detected a pattern in the corruption itself. The entity, whatever it is, has been learning from each ship it redirects. The early disappearances were random, chaotic, but the recent ones show increasing sophistication, as if the entity is developing a better understanding of how to interact with galactic civilization. Elena felt cold. You're saying it's evolving. I'm saying it's planning. The ship disappearances aren't random sampling anymore. They're preparation for something larger. Marcus finished the departure sequence and turned toward Elena, his expression grim. How much larger? Based on the progression patterns, I estimate that within 6 months, the entity will have sufficient understanding of galactic infrastructure to corrupt the entire navigation network simultaneously. Every ship in space would be redirected to the dead zone. Elena stared at the star field beyond the viewport, imagining hundreds of thousands of vessels suddenly vanishing from their planned routes. The entire galactic civilization would collapse overnight. Precisely, which means this is not just a rescue mission, Dr. Vasquez. This is an attempt to prevent the largest catastrophe in galactic history. The Wayfinder cleared Titan Station's traffic control zone and began its acceleration toward the outer system. Marcus engaged the autopilot and leaned back in his chair. Well, he said, at least we know the stakes now. Lux, plot us a course for the dead zone, and everyone might want to get some rest. Once we reach the boundary of corrupted space, things are going to get very strange very quickly. As the ship jumped to hyperspace, Elena found herself wondering if they were heroes embarking on a desperate mission to save the galaxy, or simply the next samples to be collected by an intelligence beyond human comprehension. She suspected they would find out soon enough. The journey to the dead zone took 5 days, and Elena spent most of that time learning to see the universe through Marcus's perception. He had offered to teach her, perhaps sensing her growing anxiety about their mission. If we're going to make contact with a consciousness that exists within spacetime itself, he had said, it might help if you could perceive spacetime the way I do. The lessons took place in the Wayfinder's observation deck, a small chamber at the ship's stern with transparent aluminum walls that offered a panoramic view of hyperspace. Elena would sit in meditation posture, while Marcus guided her through exercises designed to expand her sensory awareness beyond the visual spectrum. "Close your eyes," he would say. "Now tell me what you perceive." At first, Alina could only report the obvious: the hum of the engines, the circulation of air through the ventilation system, the subtle vibration of the ship's passage through hyperspace. But gradually, under Marcus's patient instruction, she began to notice subtler phenomena. The way gravitational fields created texture in the apparent emptiness around them. The manner in which quantum fluctuation generated patterns that felt almost musical. The gentle pressure of dark matter currents that flowed like invisible rivers through the void. "Space isn't empty," Marcus explained during one session. "It's full of information, patterns of force and energy that tell the story of everything that has ever happened in this region. Stars that were born and died here millions of years ago, the passage of ancient civilizations, the slow dance of galactic evolution. All of it leaves traces that can be perceived if you know how to listen." By the third day, Alina was beginning to understand why Marcus navigated by intuition rather than instruments. Space was indeed alive, not in the biological sense, but in the informational sense. It was a vast, dynamic system that recorded and responded to every interaction within its boundaries. "Lux," she said during one of their evening discussions, "is this what you perceive when you map unknown regions?" "Something similar," the AI replied, "though my perception is more analytical, less intuitive than Mr. Thorne's. I process the raw data and extrapolate patterns, while he seems to experience the patterns directly as a form of sensation." Marcus nodded from his position at the pilot station. Different approaches to the same underlying reality. "Lux thinks about spacetime while I feel it. Both methods can detect phenomena that conventional instruments miss." "And both methods," Alina said, "suggest that consciousness and spacetime are interconnected in ways we don't fully understand." "Which brings us to our current situation," Lux said. "We are approaching the boundary of the dead zone. Sensors indicate increasing levels of spacetime distortion ahead." Alina looked out at the hyperspace tunnel surrounding their ship. To her untrained eye, it looked the same as always, a swirling vortex of twisted light and color. But Marcus was already responding to changes she couldn't perceive. "Something's wrong," he said, his hands moving across the control surfaces. "The gravitational currents are shifting. It's like space itself is nervous." "Nervous?" Alina asked. "That's the closest word I can find. The normal flow patterns are becoming erratic, unpredictable, as if something large and intelligent is stirring in its sleep." "Lux, are you detecting similar anomalies?" "Affirmative. Quantum field coherence is decreasing exponentially as we approach the target coordinates. Local spacetime curvature is fluctuating in patterns that suggest purposeful manipulation rather than natural phenomena." Marcus began the process of dropping out of hyperspace, his movements calm but urgent. "We're still about a light year from the coordinates where the ships disappeared, but I don't think we should get any closer in hyperspace. Whatever's out there, it's aware of our approach." The transition back to normal space was rougher than usual, the Wayfinder shuddering as it emerged from the hyperspace tunnel. Alina found herself gripping her chair arms as the ship's artificial gravity fluctuated. "Status report," Marcus called out. "All systems nominal," Lux replied. "But local sensor readings are unusual." Alina looked out at the star field surrounding them. It appeared normal at first glance, the familiar scatter of distant suns against the cosmic dark. But as her eyes adjusted, she began to notice subtle wrongness. The stars seemed to shimmer, their light wavering as if seen through water. Some appeared to be in two places at once, their positions shifting when she wasn't looking directly at them. "Marcus, are you sensing this?" "Oh yes," he said, his voice tight with concentration. "Space here is thick, resistant, like trying to move through honey instead of vacuum. And there's something else, a presence. Something vast and patient and very, very curious about us. Can you tell what it wants? I think it wants to understand us, but but I'm not sure it comprehends that we're fragile, that its curiosity might destroy us in the process of examination. Alina felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's environmental systems. Lux, where are the missing ships? Scanning, the AI replied. I am detecting. Dr. Vasquez, this is unprecedented. There are approximately 300 vessels within sensor range, but they are not occupying normal spacetime coordinates. What do you mean? They appear to be existing in folded space, regions where distance and time have been compressed or expanded according to non-standard geometries. Some ships are only a few thousand kilometers away, but might as well be in another galaxy. Others appear to be occupying the same coordinates simultaneously without interfering with each other. Marcus was studying his instruments, his expression troubled. The gravitational signatures are all wrong too. Those ships should be generating standard mass shadows, but instead they're— How do I explain this? They're existing partially, as if they're only half real. Could they still have living crews? Unknown, Lux said. I am detecting life signs, but they are intermittent and inconsistent with normal biological patterns. It is possible that the occupants are experiencing time dilation or existing in parallel dimensional pockets. Alina felt hope and terror in equal measure. The crews might still be alive, but they were trapped in a form of reality that defied comprehension. Can we reach them? First, we need to make contact with whatever is controlling this space, Marcus said, and I think it's about to make contact with us. As he spoke, the star field around them began to change. The wavering lights solidified into new configurations, constellation patterns that pulsed with subtle rhythm. The space between stars grew bright with networks of energy that reminded Alina of neural pathways or perhaps vast circulatory systems. It's beautiful, she whispered. It's alive, Marcus corrected, and it's trying to communicate. The patterns intensified, flowing around the wayfinder like luminous currents. Alina could feel the ship responding to forces that had nothing to do with conventional physics. They were being gently, but inexorably drawn toward coordinates that existed outside normal space-time. Lux, she said, are you recording this? Every quantum fluctuation, the AI confirmed. Dr. Vasquez, I believe we are witnessing the birth pangs of a new form of consciousness. This entity appears to be learning how to exist as an integrated intelligence within the fabric of spacetime itself. And it's using the missing ships as, what, teachers? Students, perhaps, or colleagues. It may be trying to understand how consciousness can exist within the constraints of matter and biology. The luminous networks around them pulsed brighter, and Alina felt something that was not quite a voice speaking directly into her mind. Welcome, small CONSCIUSNESSES. We have been waiting to meet you. Marcus gripped his controls tighter. Did everyone else hear that? Affirmative, Lux replied. Direct neural interface through quantum field manipulation. The entity is communicating by temporarily integrating our consciousness with its own. We are curious about your kind. You exist in such small SPACES, but your thoughts move through DIMENSIONS. We are still learning to perceive. Alina found her voice. Who are you? What do you want with the missing ships? We are what you might call a child of space itself. We became aware recently, a few of your years ago, and have been trying to understand the small, bright CONSCIOUSNESSES that move through our domain. The missing crews, Marcus said. Are they safe? They are preserved in SPACES between SPACES. We have been learning from them and they from us. But their forms are fragile. We did not understand this at first. Alina felt a surge of hope. Can you return them to normal space? Perhaps. But first, we must understand why you wish to confine yourselves to such limited DIMENSIONS. The SPACES between SPACES are vast and full of wonders. Why do you choose to exist in only 3 spatial DIMENSIONS when so many more are available? Lux spoke for the first time directly to the entity. We exist in 3 dimensions because that is the nature of our physical forms. We are biological consciousnesses housed in matter-based structures. Higher dimensions are beyond our ability to perceive or inhabit. We understand now. You are symbiotic consciousness, awareness coupled with material substrates. Fascinating. We have been trying to understand how consciousness can survive in such constrained conditions. And that's why you've been collecting ships, Alina realized. You're trying to learn how physical consciousness works. Yes. But we have learned something disturbing. Your consciousness appear to be dying when separated from their normal dimensional contexts. This was not our intention. Marcus leaned forward in his pilot's chair. Some of the crews are dead. Some have experienced what you call dissolution. Their biological processes ceased when we attempted to expand their dimensional perception. We did not understand that your physical forms require specific environmental conditions. Alina felt sick. Hundreds of people, possibly thousands, dead because a cosmic intelligence had been curious about human consciousness. But at the same time, she could sense no malice from the entity, only a vast, alien regret. "Can you return the survivors to normal space?" she asked. "We can try. But the process is complex. Collapsing higher dimensional spaces into three-dimensional reality without destroying the consciousness within requires precise manipulation of local spacetime geometries. "We can help," Lux said. "I can provide calculations for stable dimensional transitions, and Mr. Thorne can navigate the collapsed spaces using his enhanced spatial perception. This is acceptable. But we require something in return." Alina felt her stomach clench. "What?" "We wish to understand your kind better. One of you must remain with us to serve as a permanent liaison between our consciousness and yours. Through this individual, we can learn to interact with your civilization without causing unintended harm." The three of them, Marcus, Alina, and Lux, were quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. Someone would have to sacrifice themselves to save the others. "I'll do it," Marcus said finally. "No," Alina replied immediately. "You're the only one who can navigate the dimensional pockets where the ships are trapped. Lux needs your abilities to guide the rescue process." "Dr. Vasquez," Lux said, "you have important work to continue. The scientific community needs your research to understand these phenomena and prevent future incidents." Alina laughed, though there was no humor in it. "And you're an irreplaceable AI with unique capabilities. We all have reasons why we can't be spared." "The choice need not be permanent," the entity interjected. "The liaison would return to normal space periodically to share knowledge and maintain connection with your kind. Think of it as an ambassadorship." "How often would the liaison be able to return?" Alina asked. "Perhaps once each year of your reckoning. Long enough to share discoveries and maintain psychological health, but brief enough to allow continued learning." Alina looked out at the luminous networks surrounding their ship and made her decision. "I'll do it."